Coming up next on Backchecking the Bolts, we're going to take a look at the NHL Trade Deadline. It concluded on Friday at 3 o'clock. Were the Bolts winners or were they losers? We're also going to take a look at some of the other big deals that happened on Friday. Plus, we're going to recap the Bolts weekend at Toronto and at Buffalo. Justin Godfrey and I will be giving you the latest and more. It's coming up next on Backchecking the Bolts.
Welcome to Backchecking the Bolts. Backchecking the Bolts is your cup of coffee to get you the latest on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Join host Jason Linkus and the managing editor of Raw Charge, Justin Godfrey, as they break down the Lightning's most recent games and go beyond the highlights, telling you what the box scores didn't. It's time to drop the puck.
It is March 9th, and the Bolts just came off of, let's just call it an interesting game against Buffalo. You are on the Backchecking the Bolts podcast. Hello, everybody. I am Jason Linkus, and I'm always joined by the managing editor of Raw Charge. He is the one and only Justin Godfrey. Justin, before we talk about the game, how was that Kumquat Festival over in Dade City?
You know, it was a little bigger than I expected. It was a bit of a drive, but you got to go past the old stomping grounds. You know, drove past St. Leo College, where we both matriculated from, and then did a good old beautiful downtown Dade City, where I think they were anticipating about 40,000 people, and it was a lot bigger than I thought.
40,000, really?
Yeah, they had there's roughly, I would say eight blocks by 3 blocks section of downtown, booths all over the place. Yeah, I did try some kumquat pie. It was fantastic. And for those of you who aren't quite aware of what a kumquat is, imagine if you crossbred, I would say, an orange with about the size of an olive, slightly bigger than a large olive. That is what it is. It is a member of the citrus family. There's a little town called St. Joe, just north of Dade City, which is one of the largest kumquat producers in the world. Therefore, the annual Kumquat Festival in Dade City. A lot of vendors out there, a lot of good food. There was fried Oreos, fried Twinkies, fried everything, funnel cake. Everybody loves a good funnel cake. And then just a lot of vendors out there. So I think my lovely other half stocked up on our soap collection, as well as, I forgot what else she bought, something else. We're good to go. So it's always nice. You know, it was 80 some degrees out. The sun was out. Stroll through historic Dade City and, yeah, enjoy a slice of kumquat pie.
This is the first time in 14 episodes that we've actually mentioned the word breeding before, but hey, there's always a first for everything.
Hey, you know, that's kind of the fun part, you know, when we talk about traveling and stuff like that, just some of these local festivals that people aren't quite aware of, they do make for some entertaining days. So yeah, always check that local events calendar when you go out to travel. You never know what you're going to stumble across.
If you're new to Backchecking the Bolts, one of the things that we like to do, Justin and I are travelers, we like to actually look at NHL cities and tell you where to travel to. Some hidden spots, recommendations. We've been fortunate enough to travel to pretty much every NHL city to see games. So we just try to give you a little bit of inside information. And now, if you just happen to be in Eastern Pasco County, now you know a little bit more about kumquats.
There's going to be no such thing as too much kumquat knowledge, sir.
Well, let's give everyone a little bit of knowledge about what happened at the deadline and some of the Lightning roster moves. First of all, Justin, Curtis Douglas was placed on waivers. You had mentioned in the podcast before that Julien Brisebois probably wanted to sneak him down to Syracuse. That did not happen. What was your thoughts?
I thought it was interesting that Vancouver picked him up. Yeah, they definitely need some NHL bodies. He's going back out west. You know, he was part of the Utah/Arizona organization for a long time. He'll get some playing time out there, which should be nice. So it's a good deal for him. I think the travel probably sucks. Nobody likes flying cross country, especially after he's set up in Tampa for most of the winter. But yeah, he's going to go out there. He's probably going to be a fourth line player for him, but I have a feeling he's going to get a lot more playing time than he saw in Tampa. And there's always a chance that later on he does get put back on waivers before the end of the year. If the Lightning want to pick him up to help Syracuse out down the stretch, they can always do that. But I think it's a good chance for him. The Lightning freed up a roster spot, which they then promptly filled on Friday. So I think overall it was an improvement for the Lightning.
The Bolts did make one trade at the deadline, and it was bringing back an old face. Corey Perry who played with Tampa from 21 to 2023. He was with the Kings. They got him for a second-round pick. Now, first of all, Justin, I was surprised it took a second-round pick to get Corey Perry. I was surprised that Los Angeles traded him because they went out and got Panarin, so you thought they were going to be buyers at the deadline. But Perry was actually having a quietly decent season, 28 points in 50 games. He's your typical third-line guy now at this point of his career. He's the age of 40. I liked the move. I thought a second-round pick was a little bit high, but the Lightning are trying to win the Cup. You have to make some of these moves. I like the Corey Perry addition.
Yeah, it's not something you write home about and celebrate in the streets or anything like that, but I think it was a solid pickup. From what Brisebois said afterwards, he wasn't entirely sure Perry was on the market, and there had actually been some talk about LA extending him going into Thursday night, Friday morning. The draft pick's a 2028 second round pick. I'm not overly bummed out about it. It's going to be what it is. If the Lightning want to, they can always pick another pick, draft pick back up by then. It's a couple years down the road. And with some of the other deals that were going on during Friday, seemed to be the price to pay for a veteran. He comes in, he knows the system, he's going to fit right in, he's going to be down on that fourth line. So he's actually seen some second unit power play time. And it seems over the last couple of games, Cooper's balanced out the power plays a little bit more. It's, instead of 90%, 10% between the two units, it's more like 80-20. I think he has a little, Cooper has a little bit more confidence in Perry out there, and he's doing what Corey Perry does. So he comes in, he gives him some veteran experience. I think he's a great mentor for Connor Geekie, who's he's playing on that line with. They're going to play similar styles. Geekie probably has a little more offensive skill in his game, but there's no one better to learn to play in front of the net than Corey Perry.
Sometimes getting that veteran leader, you can't say enough about it. And you're right. When he is able to play with a guy like Connor Geekie, helping him develop is a nice little addition to a part of this deal. Now, the other Lightning move, I should say Lightning news, was Emil Lilleberg. He will be out 2 weeks. I believe he took a puck to the face.
Yeah, I think it was either practice before the Winnipeg game or in warmups. Took a puck to the face. It sounded like he broke something. You're pretty familiar with orbital bone fractures. I don't know if that's what it was, but yeah, he took a puck to the face. Sounds like he's out a couple of weeks. I think it was the diagnosis. So he joins Nick Paul on the sidelines, as well as Gage Goncalves, as I butchered that name, unfortunately. Brisebois did provide a little update on those two in his post-trade deadline presser. So it looks like Goncalves is officially day-to-day. There's a good chance he'll be back for the homestand. And then Nick Paul, they said probably another week or so. He has been skating, but it sounds like he's out for another week or so. So that's another 3 or 4 games for Geekie, assuming he's probably going to be one of the casualties or roster casualties once Paul and Goncalves are back in the lineup. I could see a fourth line of Paul, Goncalves, and Corey Perry, which makes for a pretty interesting fourth line. But yeah, that's what we're kind of looking at right now as far as the roster. There was some news. I don't know if we're going to have to wait a couple days to see what happened. Erik Chernak got into that second period fight tonight against Buffalo, didn't return to the game after that. So we're going to see what happened. He was kind of shaking his hand as he went down the tunnel. So we're going to see if that's long term, if the injuries just keep kind of rolling in for the Lightning.
If Chernak is out, who's in?
You're probably looking to see right side defenseman. You're looking, Carlisle probably draws back in right now immediately. If it's any kind of long term, hopefully it times out to where Lilleberg's back. I could see them recalling. Maybe Max Groshov gets another shot, inject a little bit of speed back into the lineup there. He's been doing pretty well down at Syracuse. Just kind of keep shuffling the decks here in the defense. It's going to be an interesting to see if he's out long, how they kind of fill that role.
We're going to be talking about the winners and losers at the deadline. I know everybody wants to talk about this Buffalo game where the Bolts lost 8-7, but we're going to talk about the deadline first. Justin, I had the winners of the deadline, Buffalo. The reason is they needed depth. Buffalo was not a deep team. They were able to get some depth. They got Sam Carrick for faceoffs on the blue line. They got Logan Stanley. They got Luke Schenn from Winnipeg. Do I think this makes them a Stanley Cup contender? I don't. I think right now they are just on an amazing hot streak. And I think once they come back down to earth, I don't think they're a team that is as good as Carolina or Tampa. Just my own opinion. I liked what Colorado did in the short term by getting Nazem Kadri. You now have that third line center you can roll out there with confidence. But Justin, he has a large cap hit. Calgary took about 1.8 off of that contract?
Yeah, it's 1.4 million Calgary retained. And that's kind of one of those, new wrinkles to the trade deadline this year where you could not do the double retention deal. I have a feeling that's why it took quite a while for Kadri to go through. Also, probably why a couple other people like a Robert Thomas didn't get moved. GMs were having trouble finding the salary, finding the room to make things work out. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting. One thing I was kind of thinking about here with a deal like Kadri, like you said, it's a good short-term move. Does Colorado move him in the offseason and maybe retain a little bit of salary? Some of these players that were moved, a portion of their salary was taken off. They could be moved again, and now you're outside that 70-day deadline for double retention. So we'll see. Made for a slower deadline. Does it make for more action in the offseason around the draft? So that's something to keep an eye on as GMs adjust to this new, double retention rule and some of the restrictions that the new CBA is going to put on them.
When we had our podcast on Friday morning, and this was before the deadline was official, I had mentioned to you that players with term, longer contracts were not being traded. A lot of the guys that we saw were unrestricted free agents after this year or after 2027. And I think that with the deals that we saw on Friday, with the exception of Kadri, that was still the truth.
Yeah, I don't think too many people, signed past, I would say next year really moved. We saw a lot of smoke and a lot of mirrors about some of that stuff. Vincent Trocheck didn't go anywhere. Jordan Kyrou didn't go anywhere. Robert Thomas didn't go anywhere. Go thought it, almost went somewhere, but he used what was in his power to go ahead and turn that deal down. Yeah, I think GMs, it's kind of funny because they did have all season to prepare for it. It was pretty well known that, these were going to be the rules for the trade deadline. So for them to kind of complain about it at the last minute, rings a little hollow for me. But they are NHL GMs. They pay people to take care of this cap stuff. So by next year, they'll have it all figured out. I think it will be back to our regularly scheduled trade deadline with them finding the loopholes and everything and moving forward.
I want to talk about some trade deadline losers. And Justin, you mentioned the name Vincent Trocheck. The New York Rangers are going nowhere. They're probably not going anywhere next year. I was shocked they did not move him. I'm surprised they didn't move some other guys on that team and expiring contracts. They were dead silent at the deadline. I don't get it. I'm not sure what Chris Drury, their general manager, is doing.
Yeah, I don't think Chris Drury knows what Chris Drury's doing, to tell you the truth. I got to think ownership's got to have a long conversation with him this summer, I think. Because the funny thing is, I still have a feeling that, Trocheck's going to get moved, but what's he going to get moved for in the offseason? It's probably going to end up going for like a third-round pick now. I think Drury kind of set his sights a little too high on what he could get back, never came off of it, and, now they're going to have to figure it out, and he's going to take pennies on the dollar when he probably could have pulled, at least one first-round pick, or a decent prospect for him. But the Rangers are a mystifying team. They ended up trading one of their younger players. I mean, Brendan Altman went out to Calgary for Jacob Pataglia, and I know he's had some issues with management, the way he's been used, but still, you would think the 23-year-old kid is the one you want to keep around as opposed to someone like Trocheck who's taken up a bunch of your money, bunch of your salary cap, and is an aging player. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do in the summer. Maybe he rescues it with some nice deals, but at this point, you got to really wonder what their direction is and how much longer a player like Adam Fox is going to want to put up with it, or even Shesterkin. He just signed his big long deal, but did he sign up for 8 more years of them rebuilding? 3 more times. So we're going to see what they end up doing.
Another team that I thought was a loser was Carolina, who right now is in the top spot in the East, but they did nothing. They're a good team. Don't get me wrong. I think are a team that's destined for the conference finals. They've been there numerous times. And the last few times they've been to the conference finals, they've been obliterated. I don't think they've won more than one game in any of those series. So I thought with the number of first-round draft picks they had, I thought that they would make some moves. try to tinker the roster a little bit just to get over the hump. In the past, they went out and they traded for Jake Gensel from the Penguins. They got Mikko Rantanen from Colorado, who they eventually traded to Dallas. But they've never been afraid to make moves. I was surprised this year they didn't do anything.
I think they kind of trust in their team a little bit more this year. I thought they made some good moves in the offseason, bringing in Keandre Miller, bringing in, signing Nick Ehlers to a deal. I think they're a little bit deeper than we've seen them in the past. And maybe those trades that they made the last couple of years and not paying off made them a little gun shy. That being said, I'm really surprised they didn't bring in another goaltender. I know they really like the way Brandon Boosie's playing, but you're going into a playoff run. You're going into the playoffs with Brandon Boosie, Frederick Anderson, who's kind of a shell of his old self, and then Pyotr Kochekov, who's hurt right now. So in the end, is that going to be good enough for you? You hope so, or you hope your talent's good enough to play around them. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that they basically did nothing at all. So, but yeah, they're still a good forward group. Their defense is solid as always. But we'll see how it plays out. The Metro first round is not going to be any more fun than the Atlantic. So they could be bounced in the first round, even if they finish up with, the most points in the league.
Well, let's talk about the Lightning. Let's talk about that game against Toronto. It was a 5-2 victory on Saturday. Justin, the Bolts finally found their offense. They scored 4 goals in the first period. After that, it was pretty much on cruise control. John Cooper, though, made some changes within his lineup. What did he do?
So it kind of mixed things up. You had Corey Perry in, who went back to the 12-6 rotation. They had been rolling pretty much 11-7 since the Olympic break, which was more by necessity than anything else, just because of some of the injuries they've had up front. They got 12 healthy forwards now, so he rolled them out. You saw kind of a mix-up of that line. He broke up the Yanni Gord line for a lot of the game. He had Oliver Bjorkstrand playing down. He had Zemgus Girgensons playing up with Anthony Cirelli and Brandon Hagel. So I think Cooper was just kind of looking for a little bit of a spark, maybe get the offense going. They'd been relying so heavily on the top line that I think sometimes you just move players around. You let them, it just kind of changes their outlook on the game a little bit. Maybe they see something. Against Buffalo, he did kind of go back to some of the older lines. The Buffalo game is just its own beast, and we'll talk about that later. But it's kind of hard to, just with the penalties in that game, to track how they were doing. But another thing is he also broke up the defense, the defensive pairings as well. JJ Moser and Darren Radish stayed together, but the Ryan McDonough, Eric Cernak pairing has been golden since 2020, and he broke those up. Hedman was playing with Cernak for most of the game against Toronto, and then Charles Edward Stewart jumped up to play with McDonough. Cooper's kind of, I think he's just trying to wake his team up a little bit. They've been in this funk since the break, coming out of the break, and there's only so much you can do. You're not going to bench anybody really that matters. I think you just kind of shuffle the lines around, give them a little bit of a new look, and then see where it goes. Like you said, the offense took off. They scored the 4 times. Personally, I'm not going to read too much into a Toronto win right now. That team is, I hate to say any NHL player, any high-level athlete has quit on a coach or quit on a team, but they are just playing with absolutely zero passion right now. So, you beat Toronto, you stop the losing streak. That's great, but can you read too much out of it? I would say not really.
You had mentioned the defensive pairing, the changes. McDonough was playing with Destu, correct? And
Correct. Yeah.
Hedman was playing with Cernak. How does that change things? I mean, previously, Hedman with Destu instead of Cernak, how does that impact the Lightning defense? Does it make them quicker? Does it make them more physical? What does it do?
I think with the Hedman-Cernak pairing, it gives Hedman a little bit more ability to kind of be more offensive, play more to his strength. I mean, Cernak is going to be your stay-at-home defenseman. He's going to cover for you. The drawback is that you just don't have a lot of speed on that pairing anymore. I mean, Hedman's he's still laboring through it. It seems he doesn't have that smooth skating style that we've seen in the past, and he's kind of getting burned a little bit. So I think with Cernak back there, you can tell Victor, hey, go up, push up on the play, make your passes, do your offense, and you have a safety net behind him. When he's playing with a younger player like Destu, who's not as experienced, Hedman's kind of got to play both roles a little bit. So that gives him the chance. And for Destu, it's kind of the same. You got Ryan McDonough, probably one of the best defensive defensemen, for lack of a better phrase, in the game right now, even at 35 plus years old. The guy's a rock back there. So you can let Destu carry the puck up the ice, knowing that McDonough's going to be back. So, yeah, kind of mixes it up a little bit. We'll see how long it lasts. Cooper does love his safety blankets, and that McDonough-Chernak pairing has been a safety blanket for him forever. If the big guy is healthy, I wouldn't be surprised to see them back once they're back on the home ice, and Cooper can control the matchups again.
Justin, in the Toronto game, Nikita Kucherov had 4 assists. And today, it's the Nurture Marketing trivia question of the day.
Right.
Nikita Kucherov has the Lightning record with 5 assists in a game. That record is shared with 4 other players. Who are they?
I think I got a couple of them. You said 4 other players?
4 other players.
Darren Radish?
That is correct. Darren Radish with 5 helpers on March 9th, 2024, 2 years ago to this day.
Did Chris Kontos get a 5-assist game?
No, he had a 4-goal game
Doug
in
Crossman?
the inaugural
Was it Doug
game.
Crossman?
No.
Was it like an old style defenseman? Of somebody you wouldn't think of?
No. Actually,
okay.
And I'll give you the years. 2009, 2010, and the other 2 were in 2024. Well, and of course you got Radish, so that was one
I
of
got
them.
Radish. Marty St. Louis.
2010, 5 helpers,
All right.
November 18th.
All right, so I got 2 out of the 4. Who else has put up a 5-assist game? Brendan Hagel?
That is correct. Good.
Right.
I didn't think you were going to get that one.
Yeah,
5
I
helpers.
remember he had one of those weird games. And then the other ones were from 2009.
2009. And I'll give you a
One more
hint.
time. Okay.
He is a Hall of Famer.
Sorry, I said Marty. Hall of Famer. Is it Anderchuk? No, he was gone by then.
He was gone by then.
So on the Lightning are Hall of Famers.
Do you want another hint?
It's not Mark Recchi, is it?
Yes, it is. It's the Wrecking Ball.
Yeah, you were trying to get me on that one. Yeah. So
yes, the Wrecking Ball, 5 helpers, March 1st, 2009. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's what I need you to do. You can just give me one of these 5 names. Send an email to backcheckingthebolts@yahoo.com. We will get you registered for a Nikita Kucherov jersey, compliments of Nurture Marketing. Justin, pretty good job there. I was impressed you got Hagel. I did not think you would get that.
Yeah, much better than last week's trivia question. So, but yeah, no, it's kind of with all the players that have come through there. You knew Marty St. Louis was going to be on there. You're probably kind of surprised that LeCavier never got there. I think he maxed out at 4. It's it's always nice when teammates are helping teammates. And
well, let's get to the reason we're here tonight. It's to talk about the Buffalo game. If you didn't catch this one, the Bolts fell by a score of 8-7. Justin, this game had a little bit of everything to it. First off, the fisticuffs. I mean, this was a physical game. I had even mentioned it a week ago, the way the 6-2 loss to Buffalo ended. I thought the game was going to be chippy, but I didn't expect this.
I think you got a couple of, probably about 2 or 3 factors going on here. As you mentioned, the chippiness from the way the game ended the last time with Kessler. I believe it was Kesselring. It was either Kesselring or Mallenstein that kind of fell on top of Dominic James and led to the big injury. I think there was some pushing and shoving towards the last whistle there as well. So you had that going in. 2 teams meeting each other again at the within a week of each other, a little bit over a week. 2 teams fighting for first place. You got a Buffalo team here that hasn't been in this position God knows how long. They got something to prove on home ice. A lot of talk today about how this is a real playoff atmosphere kind of game with Buffalo, fighting for first place. So I think the Lightning hear this and they're like, hey, man, you guys might be the new kids on the block here, but we want to show you what it's like to play playoff hockey. We're going to be in your face. We're going to finish every check. We're going to push you around and see if you guys break a little bit. And to Buffalo's credit, I don't think they did. I thought Buffalo handled it pretty well. There's a lot of 4-on-4 action, a lot of matching minors. And then when Buffalo had their chances on the power play, they took advantage of it. So, I thought it was a pretty good showing by the Sabres. We've seen the Lightning do this a couple times throughout the year where they have this kind of newfound edge to them. It's mostly been against Florida, so I had to kind of double check the schedule and make sure this wasn't some random Florida game that popped up out of nowhere. But yeah, so it was good to see. I liked it. I don't think anything was too egregious. There weren't, there were a couple after the whistle hits it that didn't care for. One on each team. I thought Sam Carrick took a nice shot at Nikita Kucherov's ribs after a goal. And then the one thing I really didn't like was the Brandon Hagel play. And we had talked about this beforehand. So it's kind of, I want to say it's in the second period or so. Hagel's in front of the net. He's battling, he's doing what Brandon Hagel does. He either breaks his stick slashing somebody or gets it knocked out of his hands. And he really tries to goad Rasmus Dahlin into a fight. Now, Dahlin had fought earlier in the game. It was apparent from the get-go he wanted no part of Hagel. He was willing to skate away from it. Hagel's tugging at his jersey the whole way. Dahlin follows the play up the ice. Hagel's from behind. And honestly, it's amazing Hagel didn't get kicked out of the game for this. He starts punching Dahlin in the back of the head. They go to the ice. Hagel keeps punching him, and then the scrum breaks out. I think even Luukkonen was involved at one point, but Hagel ends up with two roughing penalties, so a double minor, and stays in the game. But I've seen people kicked out for way less than that. I mean, it was uncalled for. You basically let it go. Once you know Dahlin's not going to engage with you, you separate, you skate off, you chirp him a little bit about not wanting to throw the gloves, and you move on with your life. Hagel is who Hagel is. He gets a little emotional through these games, and I think it kind of got the better of him there. Buffalo goes down, scores on the first power play, and kind of put the game. You just kind of felt it was out of reach because the Lightning have been kind of getting back into the action at that point. Now, in the end, they do end up coming back, but yeah, I just thought it was it's kind of a bad moment, not a great look for Hagel, and you kind of want to get that out of your game, especially come playoff time. You don't want to take emotional penalties like that.
Now, the Bolts fell down 3-0, but Justin, this game was tied at 4 after the second period. And again, like many games during the streak and even the Carolina game, when the losing streak has started, the Bolts respond. They don't go away. You have to like that about the team right now.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes the first match against Buffalo such the outlier. Is it was a game where I felt like they didn't, really fight back. They weren't going to let it happen twice, that's for sure. It's 3-1, and then they're kind of coming back. Kind of a key play. They score to make it 3-1, then they give up a shorthanded goal, goes to 4-1, and then they just kind of got back to doing what they did. I don't think Buffalo had a great defensive game. I don't think Luukkonen had a great game. I'd be a little more concerned if I was Buffalo. At least the Lightning can say, hey, we had our backup goalie give up 8 goals. You had your number one goalie give up 7 on like 20 shots or something like that, 21 shots. So I think it's a little matter of concern, but I do like how they really battled back.
You had mentioned Pekka Luukkonen gives up 7 goals for Buffalo. The Bolts went with Jonas Johansson again on the back-to-back. As important as this game was, Justin, if you were John Cooper, would you have gone with Vasilevsky playing both?
No, he's not going to get out of his structure. I think the main question was, would Johansson have gotten the Toronto game, and then that saved Vasilevsky for the Buffalo game. The only problem with that is if Johansson loses the Toronto game, or if the Lightning lose that game, now you're chasing the points. And, Cooper would rather have the 2 points in hand by beating, having Vasilevsky in net for the Toronto game. You win that game, cool. Now if you beat Buffalo, you win both halves of the back-to-back. That's always been his philosophy with these back-to-backs is you want to win the first one. You win the second one, it's icing on the cake. But if you lose the first one and you lose the second one, now you've lost both. So great analysis there, by the way. But yeah, it's basically what I'm trying to say is that you lose the first one, now you're putting more pressure on yourself to win that second one. And if it doesn't work out for you, now you've really put yourself in a hole. So, yeah, I don't think he's the guy's been behind the bench for 13, 14 years now. He's not going to change the way he handles these. Would he have liked to get the points? Yes, but it is what it is. Now you move on. You're back home. You got 4 games. One of the problems with starting Vasilevsky in both games is you just don't have the time off in March. If they had more of a break somewhere down the road in, say, a week or so, maybe you see it. But right now, they're right back at it. They have tomorrow off, and then they're right back on the ice for a 4-game homestand.
In the third period, the Bolts actually jumped out to a 6-4 lead and then a 7-5 lead after Brandon Hagel banged home a rebound. But then the wheels just fell off. Buffalo, I thought their speed really gave Tampa a lot of trouble. What led to the meltdown from being up 7-5 to all of a sudden trailing 8-7?
It's just bad play in the neutral zone to me, especially against a team like Buffalo that's going to attack you with speed. If you can shut them down in the neutral zone, or if you can get your forecheck going and make them work the entire 200 feet, they're going to have a much tougher time than what they had in the third period. And I thought the Lightning kind of got away with that. They got away with it for a lot of the middle half of the game, just by outscoring their problems. They couldn't do it at the end. They couldn't hold on. You didn't want to see him go into a defensive shell either, because Buffalo can pick you apart that way as well. So I do give him credit for not doing that, but you got to be somewhat responsible at some point. And I thought they really got out of it, especially in the neutral zone. They allowed Buffalo to enter with speed. Something that the Lightning broadcasters, Brian England, was pointing out is during this losing streak, the Lightning defense has gotten really wide. So there's a lot of space in the middle of the ice for other teams to attack. That's something they really have to keep an eye out for moving forward. Kind of close that gap up a little bit, or have a forward back helping them out with that. You just didn't see it in this game. So Buffalo's either able to score off the rush, or they're able to get easy entries, and now the Lightning are chasing them around, and that's kind of what happened over the last 5 minutes of the game.
Justin, after the game, John Cooper talked about special teams. Buffalo was 4 for 7 on the power play and had a shorthanded goal. What did John Cooper have to say?
Yeah, and basically said that he liked the way his team played 5-on-5. He actually said he loved the way they played at 5-on-5. They outscored Buffalo 6-3, and they had a lot of chances. But yeah, he got to tighten up that special teams. The Lightning have been, I think they were the third-rated penalty kill this year, so they've done it for most of the time. But you can't. A team like Buffalo, with the scoring talent that they have with Tage Thompson and Alex Duke, you just can't keep handing them chances, and that's kind of what they did early in the game. And then at the end, that last power play, Josh Doan scores on it. It's just, yeah, it's tough. Anytime you give up a shorthanded goal, especially in a game you're chasing, is such a deflating moment. Like I said, it was 3-1 at the time. The Lightning score on the power play, which honestly they eventually did. You cut it to 3-2, and now you have all the momentum. Instead, two blows down the side and makes it 4-1, and now you're really seriously chasing it. So, yeah, something they'll clean up. I think now that they've kind of got their defense hopefully back, you'll see a little bit more play out of that. Not having all their forwards healthy either kind of hurts. I mean, Hagel was in the box, like we said, for 4 minutes. He's one of their top penalty killers. So sometimes when you have those guys out, it's also tough for the unit to come through. But yeah, they just got to be better, man. They gotta get back to what they were doing, which is make the simple clears. On Doan's goal, Yanni Gourde had a chance to knock it out, but he didn't clear it, and they keep it in, and they score. Puck hits the post, comes right to Doan, and he puts it home. So.
That was the game winner from Doan.
Yeah.
Correct. Now let's take a quick look at the Eastern Conference standings. In the Atlantic, the Buffalo Sabres leapfrogged the Lightning. They now have 84 points, but they've played 2 extra games. The Lightning sit in second with 82. The Red Wings are in third with 79. Over in the Metro, you have Carolina leading the conference with 86 points. The Penguins with 78. The Islanders with 77. The 2 wildcard spots right now are Montreal with 78 and the Boston Bruins with 76. Columbus Blue Jackets are hot on their heels with 73 points, and Ottawa is right now 10th in the conference with 71 points. Justin, there's a lot to recap in this one. What's going on at Raw Charge?
Probably going to break down, got a couple more things, a couple more thoughts to share for the trade deadline now that we're a couple days away from it. So I'll be sharing that. Probably going to be a subscribers only post for those of you out there who aren't aware. We do have a subscription option to help support the website, and occasionally I'll drop in some bonus articles that are only available to subscribers. So you'll probably see that either probably tomorrow or Tuesday. And then I'll kind of break down this homestand. It's going to be a tough homestand. I think they got Carolina on it, a couple other teams, Detroit's in there. So yeah, it's going to be another tough homestand. They got to get their act together, posit some thoughts on how they can kind of get back to the Lightning ways, and then just get you your standard recaps and keep you up to date on the news going around the league.
This coming week, the Bolts return home on Tuesday. They face the Columbus Blue Jackets at 7. On Thursday, home against the Red Wings at 7. And on Saturday, they host the Carolina Hurricanes at 7 o'clock. That's a pretty tough 3-game homestand there, Justin, coming back after losing 5 of 6.
Yeah, I mean, you got Carolina, who's said best team in the Metro. Then you got 2 teams in Detroit and Columbus that are, vying for that last playoff spot. I think Detroit's kind of in the same boat as Buffalo is, where they haven't been here for a while. So it's going to be another one of these young teams that wants to knock the champ off. So they're going to be throwing both barrels at the Lightning. Columbus has stumbled a little bit lately, but they're still a tough team to play. So yeah, it's not like the Lightning get a chance to catch their breath with this homestand. And the good news is, if they do pull out some victories, it's going to be quality wins that they're playing. So it'll be a good indication that their game has gotten better as we go over the last 20 games of the season.
Our next podcast will be out on Wednesday after the Bolts play the Columbus Blue Jackets. For Justin Godfrey, you can see him at Raw Charge at www.rawcharge.com. I'm Jason Linkus. Thanks for joining us today. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the Backchecking the Bolts on the YouTube channel or whatever podcast platform you use. Thanks again, and go Bolts.
Go Bolts.
Thank you for listening to Backchecking the Bolts. We are free and available on all platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon, YouTube, and Deezer. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe and leave a review. You can follow Justin on Blue Sky at rawcharge.com. You can follow the show on X at Tampa_Bolts_pod and on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Backchecking the Bolts. If you're interested in advertising on the show or partnering with us, you can find more information in the show notes or email Jason at backcheckingthebolts@yahoo.com.